Ever feel like you're being pulled in 100 different directions at
Well,
once?
definitely.
Maybe it's, wanting that solid, dependable routine,
Mm.
but also feeling this like undeniable urge to just break free and explore something completely new.
Yeah, that tension is real.
Or the classic one, needing that precious alone time,
Uh,
right? To recharge
Totally.
while also really craving those deep connections with people. Does that sound familiar to you?
It really does. That push and pull, those seemingly opposite desires, they're kind of vying for our attention, aren't they? It's a fundamental part of the human experience.
Yeah.
And it's exactly this dynamic, this tension that we're going to dive into today.
Absolutely, because in this deep dive, we're tackling a concept that kind of reframes these internal conflicts, this really intriguing idea of polarity and balance.
Hmm. And we'll be drawing insights from, well, a really thought-provoking source text. It looks at the universe itself through this lens of rhythmic, seemingly opposing forces.
Okay, so our aim here is to see how understanding these opposites, maybe not as rivals battling it out,
Right.
but as essential interconnected pieces of a bigger picture, how that can lead to a much richer understanding of ourselves and, well, the world around us.
Because ultimately, the universe isn't really about one force conquering another, is it?
Doesn't seem like it.
More like a continuous energetic dance
Mhm.
um, around a central point of balance,
Mhm.
equilibrium.
Okay, so the source material talks about something called the cosmic breath. What's the core idea behind that?
Think of it as the very heartbeat of creation,
Mhm.
like a constant cycle, expansion and contraction.
Okay.
And that's what fuels everything. It's the universe's fundamental rhythm, like a perpetual inhale.
And exhale.
Exactly. This underlying rhythm is what gives rise to all the dualities we observe around us.
And this idea of the cosmic breath, it directly connects to the principle of polarity, right?
Precisely.
The idea that everything has its equal yet opposite counterpart.
That's it. Light and shadow, heat and cold, um, life and death processes.
Mm.
Even things like attraction and repulsion, positive and negative charges.
Yeah.
It's a really pervasive principle.
Right.
Now, where we often get stuck, I think, is perceiving these as being in constant opposition, like they're separate, conflicting things.
Yeah, it's so easy to think of it as either this or that, black or white.
But the crucial insight here, according to the text, is recognizing they aren't isolated forces at all.
Oh.
They're actually deeply intertwined, two essential sides of the same coin. You know,
Okay.
they aren't really distinct entities, but rather two necessary points on a single spectrum, constantly defining each other through their interplay.
I like that image, a
Yeah.
spectrum. So if we think of it like that, these opposites are just different points along that continuous range.
Exactly. They are the contrasting points that give the spectrum its very definition. You
Yeah.
can't really have one extreme without the implied existence of the other, right? Even if it's at a different intensity.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And how does the cosmic breath, the inhale and exhale, fit into this spectrum idea?
Well, the text describes the positive phase, the inhale.
Yeah.
That's a movement towards concentration, energy gathering, intensifying. It's a contractive force.
Bring in. Okay.
Then the negative phase, the exhale, is the opposite energy expanding, spreading out,
Huh.
a diffusive or releasing force.
Ah.
So you can see how these two phases create the range, the spectrum upon which polarity exists.
So with something like temperature then, hot isn't fundamentally different from cold. It's not like a different substance.
Not at all, according to this view. Hot is simply a higher level of vibratory energy
Right.
on that underlying temperature spectrum compared to cold.
Hmm.
It's just a difference in the intensity of that fundamental energy, like turning up the volume on the same sound wave.
That clicks.
Okay.
Now, what about something like life and death? I mean, those feel like pretty absolute opposites.
Yeah, they do feel that way. But even there, the text points to a deep interconnectedness. Life is presented as the phase of building, of organization, growth, the constructive phase.
Mm-hmm.
Death, then, is the necessary phase of release, of breaking down, deconstruction.
Okay.
But, and this is key, this breakdown is essential for the components to be recycled, to be freed up for new cycles of life.
Ah, like composting.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
a great analogy. Transforming waste into fertile ground, it illustrates that interdependence. It's a continuous loop, each depending on the other for the ongoing flow.
Okay, so we have these spectrums, these contrasting ends, these seemingly opposing forces that are actually connected through this cosmic rhythm. But the text also introduces this idea of a 0 point. What exactly is that?
Right, the 0 point. It's a vital, often overlooked still point, the axis around which this entire cosmic pendulum swings.
The pivot.
Exactly. It's described as a state of perfect equilibrium, absolute balance, a point of rest. It's the very center from which everything emanates and to which everything returns.
So it's like the still center of that spectrum we've been talking about, the midpoint.
Precisely. It's the quiet, balanced center. All movement originates from there, and all movement ultimately returns there. It's like the eye of a hurricane.
Oh, yeah.
Right? A point of profound stillness, right in the middle of immense activity. Or maybe the silence between musical notes.
Yes.
The silence that allows the music to actually exist.
That's powerful.
It's pure potential, really, before any specific manifestation.
Okay, that's a really compelling image. So if everything is constantly in motion, swinging on these spectrums, what role does this 0 point actually play?
Well, the text suggests that everything in the universe has this inherent drive, this constant seeking of that balanced state, that 0 point.
Everything wants to get back to the middle.
In a sense, yes. The apparent conflict or tension we observe.
Yeah.
That's really just the dynamic energy of the spectrum moving away from and then inevitably returning to that central equilibrium. Think of a pendulum swinging back and forth.
Always seeking that center point of rest.
Exactly.
Can you give me some real-world examples of this seeking equilibrium?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Consider a wound healing on your body.
Okay.
The body is actively working, isn't it, to return to a state of biological balance, of wholeness.
Right. Homeostasis.
Yes. Or think about maybe a crowded, noisy room. Eventually, the energy will likely dissipate, won't it? People might settle into more balanced interactions, or some might leave, lowering the intensity back towards, well, equilibrium.
Okay, I see.
Even in economics, markets tend to self-correct over time, seeking that point where supply and demand balance out.
That helps make it more tangible. Now, the text also brings in this concept, a dragon's perspective. That sounds fascinating.
It is. It offers this insight that even something we perceive as the absolute epitome of power, like a dragon.
Right, fire and flight.
It embodies this principle of balance, too. The immense fiery energy within has to be tempered, balanced by the resilience of its scales, maybe its grounded wisdom, an inherent sense of when to unleash that power.
And when to hold back.
And to hold it back, exactly. The ability to soar needs to be balanced by periods of rest, connection to its lair, its center.
So even ultimate power isn't about just being at one extreme all the time, like maximum fire, constantly.
Exactly. The text implies that true sustainable power isn't found at those extreme ends of the spectrum, in just unchecked force.
Where is it found then?
It resides in that centered stillness, that capacity to maintain perfect dynamic balance, which actually allows the whole spectrum to exist. It's about knowing when to be fire and when to be still water, perhaps.
This 0 point, you mentioned earlier, it's not emptiness. Can you expand on that a bit? That seems important.
Yes, it's crucial. The 0 point isn't a void. It's not an absence of anything. It's actually quite the opposite.
Oh.
It's pure, undifferentiated potential. It's the fundamental state of universal energy before it takes any specific form. Think of it like the uncarved block of wood from which any sculpture could emerge.
Or the silent canvas waiting for the first stroke.
Perfect analogy, yes.
So it's the source of all possibilities, not the lack of them.
Precisely. It's the wellspring of all energy, not in its active, expressed form, but in its absolute perfect balance and inherent potentiality. It's the point of perfect rest that paradoxically makes all motion and all creation possible.
Wow. There's a quote in the text from someone named Zorian that really seems to capture this. It says, "Opposites are not enemies. They are dancers on the same stage, forever seeking the silence between the steps, the balance of the 0. That's beautiful.
It really is. It beautifully encapsulates the core message, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Recognizing that these apparent opposites are just different movements within the same continuous dance.
Yeah.
Constantly gravitating towards that central point of equilibrium.
Yeah.
That silence between the steps.
So, okay, pulling all of this together, what are the key insights for us, for, our lives?
Well, I think the fundamental takeaways are that the seemingly opposing forces we encounter both out there in the universe and maybe more importantly within ourselves, they aren't locked in some battle to the death. They are deeply interconnected, essential partners in a larger dynamic process. And the real harmony, the underlying source of all this energy and movement, lies in recognizing and maybe actively seeking the balance around that often overlooked 0 point in our own lives.
The text concludes with this idea, the dragon trial, which sounds like a way for us to put this into practice. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, it's presented as sort of an invitation, really, for you, the listener, To identify a specific conflict or tension you might be grappling with.
Okay.
That internal push and pull, maybe between seemingly contradictory desires or viewpoints you hold.
Right, like wanting security and adventure.
Exactly. And instead of trying to force one side to win or eliminate the other, consider viewing them as complementary parts of a larger cycle in your life.
Hmm.
Then ask yourself, can you identify a potential zero point there? A state of dynamic balance between these apparent opposites.
Finding the middle ground, maybe. Or the pivot point.
Sort of, yeah. But it's dynamic. How might consciously seeking that balance, rather than getting stuck at one extreme or the other, actually shift your perspective?
Yeah.
And ultimately, maybe shift your experience of that situation?
That's a really powerful exercise. So maybe that feeling of wanting both deep connection and significant alone time, it isn't a contradiction to be resolved by just choosing one.
Perhaps not.
Maybe there are two essential phases of a cycle, and the fulfilling point is actually in finding the rhythm between them, finding that balance point.
Exactly. It's about moving beyond that limiting, kind of stressful either mindset.
Okay. So as you reflect on this deep dive, maybe consider this final thought. How might a true understanding of this dynamic interplay polarity, the zero point, how might that fundamentally reshape how we approach our daily challenges, our relationships, even our understanding of what true power really means?
Yeah. It's about finding that stillness within the dance of life, isn't it? That zero point amidst all the motion.